fighter equivalents. That's right. Today we are going to be discussing fighters that are basically the equivalent of a fighter from the past or a fighter in another division based on their fight style. This is not a lookalikes, doppelganger kind of video. I'm basically going to be telling you guys, if you want to see a guy like, Brock Lesnar, this is who you're tuning in to in order to see a guy that fights like Brock Lesnar these days. If you want to see someone that fights like Conor McGregor, watch this guy. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We may as well get into this. The first fighter equivalent that we're going to get to is Anderson Silva. If you guys want to see a fighter that is similar to Anderson Silva, and let's say you're new to the UFC, you don't really know who he is, because most people watching this video probably knows who this fighter equivalent is. But it is Carlos Prates. And I've been saying this ever since he made his UFC debut. Actually, before he even made his UFC debut, I've been saying that Carlos Prates is an Anderson Silva type of fighter. He has crazy KO power in every single limb. He's got crazy KO power in his hands. He's got crazy KO power in his knees. He's got a nasty tie clinch game similar to Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva used to knock people out and hurt people badly with his clinch knees and his elbows. And Carlos Prates also just has a similar way of moving, a similar frame, a similar build. He's got that wobbly, cobbly kind of, pep in the way that he's stepping. Right? Anderson Silva, he kind of cobbled around a little bit, and he had that, these guys have like springs in their knees. Well, Carlos Prates honestly looks like he's got height surgery, to be honest. He's got that kind of like a height surgery-esque type of cobble to the way that he moves. I don't think he actually got the surgery, but you get my point. Very similar to Anderson Silva, and of course, long, rangy striking, knockout power. We used to compare Adesanya to Anderson Silva, but I think that was just based off of vibes. I don't actually think Adesanya and Silva fight that similarly. I think Carlos Prates is a lot more similar to Anderson Silva because he's kind of got that like that style where he'll catch you out of nowhere with like a front kick up the middle, right? He'll knock you out with one right hand, whereas Adesanya, he kind of needs that lean back combination, and Anderson Silva was like one shot, you get hit with one shot, and you're down and you're out basically. So, and also Prates has the clinch striking, but let's get on to the next one. Dricus du Plessis. He now has a fighter equivalent. We know Dricus has the sloppy boppy, very goofy style. At one point in his career, because now we know that there's a method to this madness, this funky junky style that he has. At one point in his career, we didn't realize that. And we were saying things like, Dricus is dangerous, but he's just so sloppy. He's got no technique. As soon as he fights someone in the top 5, like a Robert Whittaker, there's no chance he'll beat Whittaker. Like, he has a better chance at becoming the president of the United States than he does to beat Robert Whittaker. Without people even voting, he would have a better chance. I mean, I thought it was just for sure that Whittaker would easily walk him onto a high kick. That, the guy had shit defense, just totally sloppy, weird cardio. Now we know that it's actually because he's so awkward and he's super tough. Of course, he's still chatting his way through the division, but you get my point. It's like the awkwardness works. He's got ridiculous power. He never slows down. Back in the day, we used to say his cardio was not that great, but I always said it was underrated, very underrated. So that aged well. But either way, his fighter equivalent is Reinier de Ridder. Reinier de Ridder is a former former 1FC double champ. All right. And he made his UFC debut yesterday and had some of the ugliest, most defensively irresponsible, slow poke type of striking I've ever seen in my entire life. And this guy almost achieved triple champ status in 1FC, which goes to show the level difference between the UFC and 1FC. But again, back in the day, we thought Dricus was kind of shit. Dricus would come fumbling and bumbling through the middle, and he would leave himself open and hittable for about 10 seconds. There were 10-second moments where Dricus would be, it seems like he was passing his opponents in slow motion. You would see these slow-mos of Dricus, yelling And you just thought to yourself, if Derek Brunson wasn't the one that was fighting him, Robert Whittaker would be right there, and all he would have to do was lift up the leg, turn the hips, and smack him onto a head kick, and he's out. That's what it's like watching Reinier de Ridder fight. It's like if Gerald Meerschaert, slowpoke old man Gerald Meerschaert, wasn't the one that was in front of this guy last night, anyone else is sleeping him. Anyone with just fucking tiny bits of extra speed to GM3 is sleeping him. It was so bad. His striking was so unbelievably terrible that it was almost frustrating to watch him fight someone that's so slow when you just know if someone was just a little bit faster, they're knocking him out. But that's the thing. That's the thing. As I said, I thought that Robert Whittaker was 100% guaranteed to beat Dricus du Plessis. Dricus was so sloppy, so hittable, that all it took was someone just a little bit slicker than Derek Brunson to knock him out, right? And he beats Robert Whittaker, then proceeds to beat Sean Strickland, and then beats Adesanya. So Reinier de Ridder could just be one of these guys where he's just looking terrible, and then all of a sudden he takes a jump up, and that defense gets better overnight. Because Dricus du Plessis' defense did improve from the Brunson fight to the Whittaker fight, and his defense got better, right? Reinier de Ridder could just be one of those guys where he's getting beat up, he finds a submission in the third round against Cal Barajo, right? He knocks out Roman Dolidze. He's not a great striker, but you get my point. Reinier de Ridder is one of these sloppy fighters. He's so hittable. He's almost more hittable than Yuri Prohaska. A good grappler for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong, just because he couldn't finish GM3 or beat him up badly on the ground isn't necessarily a knock on his grappling. We know GM3 is a really solid grappler, so it's not like you should have expected Reinier de Ridder to dominate GM3. But, he still got the submission, still got the win, but the striking looked real sloppy, just like Dricus's did back in the day, right? And he still pulled off the win. So, yeah. And also, they just both just seem like they're just built awkward, but, we'll see them chad their way through the division nonetheless. I don't know if Reinier de Ridder will actually go that far at middleweight because, again, he doesn't have that crazy power that Dricus did. He doesn't have that same explosivity. He's slower twitch, right? He's one of the awkward, wiry type of strikers compared to Dricus, who just comes, bulldozing people. But they're still kind of similar. Let's get on to the next one. Conor McGregor. Now, this is actually a bit of a lookalike. You guys probably know who's coming up, but casuals that are watching this video, if you guys want to see someone that fights like Conor, he's only had one fight in the UFC. Well, then if you see Mauricio Rufy, another guy who trains with Carlos Prates, by the way, then you know that you're going to watch someone that fights like featherweight Conor McGregor. Specifically featherweight McGregor. This is not boxing McGregor with, heavy on his lead leg, just sort of that boxing heavy style post the Floyd Mayweather fight. This is featherweight McGregor, spinning heel kicks and shit like that, walking people onto the left hand. He's got the death face because he's still cutting weight and he takes his career serious, whereas McGregor these days is kind of bloated. But yeah, think about featherweight McGregor with the sunken in face from the brutal weight cuts. He's a Brazilian McGregor, even has a similar beard and a similar haircut to the McGregor, even a similar chest tattoo to the McGregor. And he's got a nasty left hand and just very creative with the way that he strikes. As Conor's career went on, he got less and less creative with his striking. And fair enough, in the Dustin Poirier trilogy, he threw out a couple of head kicks to try to make up for it because, he was telling us that the karate McGregor's coming back, but, that lasted for a couple seconds. But McGregor back in the featherweight days used to throw a lot of spinning attacks, spinning kicks to the body. He'd throw, jumping kicks to the face. He was just a lot more free with his movement and, of course, knocked a lot of people out, had a lot of crazy knockdowns. And similar to McGregor with his left hand, I believe Mauricio Rufy switches stances, so I don't know if he's just a southpaw, but he also has a nasty left hand and a pull-back counter left hand. And in his first fight, he was trying to bait people to throw the right hand and immediately step back, counter with the left. So just very similar to Conor McGregor. If you want to see someone that fights like him, watch Mauricio Rufy. But let's get on to the next one, Rafael Fiziev. It's been a minute since this guy's fought, and there aren't that many fighters that have similar fight styles to him. But there is one, and he's probably the least known fighter equivalent on this list, but it's actually flyweight Denise Bondar. That's right. Almost kind of looks like Fiziev too. They have the shaved head, sort of the angry man look, right? And they just have very similar stances, right? Fiziev's got that You know, everything is close. Everything's tight. He's got the Muay Thai way of moving around. But Fiziev is one of these Muay Thai guys where he's got sort of the mobility of a kickboxer with the Muay Thai stance. So he's kind of moving. And then everything he throws got that extra sting on it, right? That gritty man's way of stinging, you know, a kick, right? You just throw out a kick, but it's got that extra sting, right? And that's why we always hear Fiziev. He's very animated when he fights. He's the guy that does that whap, whap, whap every time he throws his combinations. And Denise Bondar has not had nearly as much success as Fiziev, but he fights just like him. Same stance, same way of moving around, and similar build, just lacking the wins that Fiziev had, right? Maybe flyweight's just a little bit better. This is what it looks like when you drop down 3 divisions and you find out what that skill gap is all about. That's what happens when you take lightweight skill, you put it in a lighter man's weight class. I'm partially joking, but yeah, either way, Max Holloway. Max Holloway does have some fighter equivalents in both heavier divisions and lighter divisions. The first one is Bryan Battle, the welterweight, former middleweight. Bryan Battle has that same sort of angry way of marching people down and just having that willingness to take damage. Like, you know what? I don't give a shit if I get hit 50 times. I'm going to land 70, 80, 90 punches. I'm going to land 3 to every one of my opponents, and I'm eventually going to break them, right? And I'm just going to constantly wade forward, throw shitloads of combinations, punches and bunches. And again, Max Holloway, when he's really getting into a groove, he has that like angry sort of, that angry mentality in the cage. They say don't see red, right? They say, you know, it's always the quietest guy in the room. And actually, these days, it's not. These days, if you want to be the baddest dude in the UFC cage, you got to yell, you got to see red, you got to get angry, you got to get amped. And that's Max Holloway. Again, I'm partially joking, but you know what I'm talking about. Well, Holloway points down, he starts yelling, he says, yeah, I'm the, you know, all that stuff. That's basically Bryan Battle when he was fighting Kevin Jousset. Another equivalent to Max Holloway, if you're watching any flyweight fights and you see Joshua Van is going to be in one of them, it's must-see TV. He's got the Max Holloway style down to a T. Similar power. You know, Holloway doesn't have crazy power. Neither does Joshua Van, but what he does have is the volume. A lot of you guys don't know this, and I actually just found this out just by preparing for this video, but Joshua Van has the record for the most strikes landed per minute in UFC history. And of course, you know, he's not had nearly as many fights as some of these longtime veterans like Max Holloway, so eventually that might change. But he's had more than 5 fights. That's the minimum to even be considered for being involved in the record books. He has like 8.7 strikes landed per minute, which is the record. Insane. So that goes to show that his volume is through the roof. But like Max Holloway, he's got some of the nastiest body shots, constant forward pressure, doesn't have the chin, but also just really well-rounded. He's got the kicks, he's got the body kicks just like Max, but the boxing is really what makes him similar. And again, constant forward pressure, just totally overwhelming people at all times. Constantly looks like it's a Holloway versus Calvin Kattar type of fight. Of course, maybe he's not as good as prime Holloway yet, but it's like, you know, he's very new to the UFC. He's only been training MMA for a few years. So I just can't wait to see how good Joshua Van is in the future. But every time this guy fights, he reminds me of Max Holloway, and also similar to Max, incredible takedown defense. That's another one of Max Holloway's underrated attributes in MMA that he doesn't get enough credit for, that Joshua Van does have, is just insanely good takedown defense. As a volume striker, which kind of makes them OP when they start outclassing people because you can't take them down in order to change the course of the fight. But let's get on to the next one. Charles Oliveira has some fighter equivalents too. The first one is, this will not come as a surprise, but it's Renato Moicano. Of course. Oh, I showed the other one too soon. But you know what? We may as well get on to it. Moicano and Chase Hooper. Now, I know people are going to understand the Moicano one. Both kind of long-rangey strikers. Of course, they're both Brazilian, but they just have really good ability to take people's backs, to choke them out, to beat people up on the ground. So, yeah, that's what reminds me of Oliveira. And also, Moicano's just a really good finisher. You know what I mean? You know, he's one of these guys where he's gotten a lot of striking to grappling, like quick finishes. And what I mean by that is like you'll land, a slick combination. The opponent will get rocked and they'll instantly just wrap them up in a submission. They're very quick at doing that. As they rise through the ranks, it's harder to do that, but they're still incredibly dominant grapplers. I would say Charles is a little bit better at submissions. He's better than Moicano overall, I think, but Moicano has got a very similar style to Oliveira, especially when it comes to the dominant back-taking ability. But we also have Chase Hooper, who reminds me of Charles Oliveira. And again, he's got the long, rangy type of striking, very aggressive in his approach. And, he's getting a little bit better. Now, I know people are going to be upset about this, and they're going to say, whoa, dude, what the heck, man? Chase Hooper, man, don't ever mention him in the same conversation as Charles Oliveira. That's just disrespectful. Chase Hooper has been one of the most dominant, up-and-coming fighters this year. He has totally annihilated everyone that he's fought. Everyone that he's fought looks completely lost on the ground. Submitted Jordan Levitt in the first round, and I know people are going to say, oh, Jordan Levitt sucks, but he's a grappler. He's a grappler, and he totally made him look like an idiot. And then went out there against Vyacheslav Borshev, who a lot of us thought was just going to knock his ass out because Chase Hooper's this, stick figure on the feet. A gust of wind is going to blow him over. He's got no danger element on the feet, and he goes out there and drops him in the first round. So he's starting to get that, that Oliveira-esque rise in punching power that Oliveira didn't really have in the very beginning of his career. And the grappling, this guy's just an absolute nightmare. Not only is he just insanely good everywhere on the ground, and he gets people into these super awkward positions where he'll put people in the worst type of positions where you wouldn't even think there's going to be an issue to begin with, just because, they're really good at jiu-jitsu. I'm not a jiu-jitsu expert. I can't tell you exactly what's going on. I can't break down the X's and O's, but it looks very high level. But my point is, trust me, bro, is basically what I'm saying. Trust me, bro. It's high level stuff, man. But listen, he has a very dominant ground game to Charles Oliveira where, Charles just, it's basically, trust me, bro, he's a marauder on the ground, basically. But you get what I'm saying. If you watch Chase Hooper fight, he is turning into one of the most ferocious grapplers. He's got insane jiu-jitsu, and just kind of reminds me of a young Charles Oliveira. He really does. But again, he's kind of like the tadpole equivalent to Charles Oliveira, right? Chase Hooper still has a lot of time to grow in the sport, but I really do believe he's going to be one of the best grapplers in this sport. And I'm talking like top 5 when it's all said and done. Not all time, but I think like in his division, there's no way this guy will not be ranked in the future. Just insanely skilled on the ground. And sort of reminds me of Charles Oliveira. So trust me, bro, Chase Hooper similar. But let's get on to the next one. If you are watching a fight card, if you're seeing a fight card and you're like, Trevin Giles or Max Griffin are fighting, avoid it at all costs. I'm actually being serious. Trevin Giles and Max Griffin are fighter equivalents. These might be the most boring fighters in UFC history. Trevin Giles, I told you guys about Joshua Van's strikes landed per minute. Trevin Giles' strikes landed per minute has to be like 0.5 a minute. This guy will go out there and literally throw one punch every couple of minutes, which is insanely frustrating. And every time you see Max Griffin, this is exactly the thought process for any hardcore fan. You see Max Griffin is on a card and you just fucking know it's going to be a boring snooze fest split decision. Same thing with Trevin Giles. If they don't get finished, it's going to be a boring snooze fest split decision. I can't wait for someone in the comments to say something along the lines of, bro's an idiot. He didn't know about the time where Max Griffin dropped Neil Magny and turned it into a marauder, bro. He's one of the most entertaining fighters. You just don't know the sport. Stop, dude. These guys are so unbelievably boring. It's not even funny. And I honestly, again, Trevin Giles' last fight against Mike Mallet, if you watch that fight, you will know how frustrating it was. Even the commentators were frustrated with Trevin Giles' lack of output. And that's kind of how I feel when I'm watching a Max Griffin fight. It's like, no matter who he's fighting, it's going to be a super boring fight. So, yeah, man, just typical NPC styles on the feet. But let's get on to the next one. No, dude. You can already see who his fighter equivalent is just by his fucking ear and at the side of his head. Jorge Masvidal, Jorge Mad Dog, as the casuals call him. Jorge Mad Dog, man. Dude was a bad man. But listen, Jorge Masvidal's fighter equivalent. You'll already know this if you've been watching the sport for a couple years, but it is Adrian Yanez. I remember seeing Adrian Yanez on his UFC debut, his first couple of fights. Everyone started comparing him to Jorge Masvidal. Just a very similar way of moving around, kind of like how I said Denise Bondar moved exactly like Rafael Fiziev. Jorge Masvidal and Adrian Yanez move around exactly the same. They have like this, sort of a close stance, and then every once in a while they'll kind of like hop around a little bit. They'll do like a little bit of a hop. And then very similar styles of throwing punches. They look exactly the same. If you see Jorge throw a combination and you see Yanez throw a combination, it's like the same thing, right? They just throw punches the same, very similar style, similar kinds of knockouts. And, they don't look that much alike, but, they even kind of look alike just a tiny bit. Not really, but he looks like a young Masvidal. That's what it is. I'm looking at this new photo of Jorge. And, he's got the beard and the braids, but young Jorge Masvidal had the same type of, goatee thing, similar haircut. So, yeah, he's basically like a young Jorge Masvidal. And I know he's had a couple of tough losses, but Adrian Yanez, he could have a resurgence in his career just like Jorge Masvidal did. So, yeah, very similar, even to this day. Let's get on to the next one. I believe this is the last one, but it is the great Khabib. Great Khabib, man. Who is his fighter equivalent? There aren't that many. I actually had a hard time thinking about a fighter equivalent. What I thought of is who has really crazy forward pressure and great ground and pound, but also, most importantly, looks like he's drowning people and also has a little bit of the finishing potential. I thought, Colby, but Colby doesn't have the same ground and pound finishing potential. When Khabib fought people, I was thinking about this. When Khabib fought Poirier, and then you compare it to Islam Makhachev fighting Poirier. I know Islam finished Poirier on the ground too, but Poirier looked like he had absolutely no chance to do anything but hold on for dear life and survive when he was grappling with Khabib. Whereas when he was grappling with Islam, he was a lot more calm, right? Maybe improved a little bit, but either way, Khabib just had something about his grappling that was just a totally different level of domination. And he made his opponents look like they were hopeless, they were drowning, and that there was nothing that they could do, right? Anthony Hernandez is my fighter equivalent to Khabib Nurmagomedov. Also kind of similar styles of striking. Hernandez relies on his toughness and relies on the threat of the takedown to just relentlessly march forward and throw jabs, and he's willing to eat punishment, and he'll dart in like Khabib did when he has someone up against the fence, and he'll throw a flying knee to close the distance. He'll do that all the time. And of course, he's got submissions, he's got ground and pound finishing ability, and he's one of the few fighters in the UFC that just makes people look like they are totally out of it on the ground. Like there's just nothing they can do to close the gap, especially as you get into deep waters with a guy like Khabib or Anthony Hernandez on the ground. People just look like they're holding on for dear life, right? I thought maybe Khamzat Chimaev could be an equivalent, but I actually think that nobody is an equivalent to Khamzat because Khamzat's finishing ability is like first round. And he also has that ability to make people look like they just have to hold on for dear life and there's nothing they can do. Khamzat does have that, but he finishes people too quickly. Khamzat, like, he's not in this because he's got too many quick finishes. But Khabib and Hernandez, they weren't first round finishers. They aren't first round finishers. They're like second, third round finishers. They kind of break people with pressure, but the ground and pound is nasty. The submission game is nasty, and they kind of get better and better as the fight goes on. So yeah, that's why Khamzat isn't on here. But yeah, that's basically it. That is the fighter equivalent to Khabib. I wouldn't say Makhachev. I don't really think Makhachev fights that similar to Khabib, and I also think Khabib was a more dominant grappler than Makhachev. Makhachev is an excellent grappler, but he's a different grappler. He doesn't have the same ferocious ground and pound. And I don't think he's as dominant, but he's good enough to, in my opinion, be a better overall fighter in some ways. But I don't think his grappling is that similar to Khabib or his forward pressure. Makhachev is a guy that will sometimes like to be on the back foot. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any other fighter equivalents. Until next time.